Welcome, new and old friends. My name is 242, and today, 2 got us 4 malicious compliance to listen to. Don't you just love to be compliant and mess someone's day up? If you'd like to help this channel, subscribe, check the merch and my Patreon, and more on that later. Grab yourself a tea or coffee. Things are about to get interesting. Get me in trouble for being 5 minutes late but not for showing up? Fine. Bye. Get a grip of this. I used to work at a food service place. Think coffee. My location had this rule that you would absolutely get written up if you were late over 2 minutes, but you would not get in any form of trouble if you called out. This is especially important because I lived an hour each way from where I worked, and the roads could be treacherous in the winter. One occasion, it was especially bad, and I was exactly 5 minutes late. I didn't even get to clock in before I was in the office, getting reamed out for my terrible insubordination. I confirmed the policy and refused to sign the write-up. About 2 months later, the same situation came around. I arrived in the parking lot and I looked around to see the absolute demonic blizzard taking place. The clock showing me I had 2 minutes until my shift started. Since they wanted to play that game, I called from the parking lot to tell them I wouldn't be in. The roads were just too bad. I didn't get in an amoeba of trouble for it. Soon, everyone learned the same thing as I did, and call-outs were frequent. No one in the management has ever figured out why. He wanted all his stuff back, so I made sure he got everything. By Blackbird named Jude. I posted this on r/payrevenge, and a lot of people thought it would fit well here. I just copy and pasted right from the other post. Obligatory, I'm on a mobile, so forgive me for formatting. So my last relationship was beyond bad. He was all sorts of abusive and controlling. At one point, I had the strength to break up with him, but then we got back together after we discussed some things. Stupid, I know, but yeah, love and all that. Well, anyways, one of the things we agreed on was that he and I would stop drinking alcohol because he was beyond crazy aggressive when he drank, and I wanted to support his sobriety. This is really important. Fast forward about 8 months or so, and we get into a huge fight, and I not only break up with him, I kick him out of the house and told him he wasn't even allowed back inside. We'd been living together for over a year at this point, so his mom got in touch with me about getting his stuff. While I was on the phone with her, I could hear him in the background saying, "Make sure they get everything I own or bought. I want it all back." Apparently, even the stuff he gifted me, he wanted back. But honestly, I didn't care. I was happy to get rid of anything related to him. While cleaning our room up and gathering everything, I started to come across numerous bottles and cans of alcohol. It seems he had been drinking again for a while and was hiding the evidence in the room. I mean, he was hiding them under the bed, in his guitar case, rolling up in his clothes, in some old backpacks of mine, and so on and so forth. He had said he wanted everything of his, so any bottle and the few unopened cans I found went straight into one of those garbage bags of his stuff. By the time I had gathered everything up, I had 3 bags of stuff, and one basically all just the alcohol. Dropping them off was just so satisfying. He actually called me moments after I left his parents' place, ranting about how petty and immature I was being. My response? Well, you wanted all of your stuff back, and those definitely weren't mine. Plus, I figured you probably need a drink to deal with the breakup. I promptly ended the call and blocked him on everything. Most satisfying thing I've ever done. Edit. Firstly, thank you all for the words of encouragement and everything. This happened years ago, but knowing people are still proud of me for leaving means the world to me. Also, there's definitely a lot about this story that I didn't get to post, such as cops having to be involved and other things. I didn't put open cans or unscrew and bottle lids just for the fact I didn't want to risk ruining his stuff, as there'd be a huge headache and everything. Not qualified for the position? Then I just don't do my job. By Sherlock da Vinci. A few years ago, I worked for a furniture store in the back of the store. My job consisted of unloading and loading trucks, assembling furniture, and placing it on the main floor of the store. After around 6 months there, my supervisor announced he resigned, meaning his post was up for grabs. I had all the technical requirements, so I applied. But they gave the job to another one of my colleagues who had more experience, which was totally reasonable. After maybe 1 year, my then supervisor just stopped coming into work for no reason. He just decided he had enough, and he just left. No 2 weeks notice or anything. So while the director tried to get to him, I took over the role of supervisor. I was the one with the most experience, which means that combined with my regular work, I was now the one telling people what to do, when, doing the schedule, and all the paperwork for the shipments. 3 weeks later, my colleague was officially fired by my director. In those 3 weeks, I kept doing the job of the supervisor and doing it pretty well, so I thought the promotion would come to me. But my director did nothing. I went to see him, explained what I had been doing, and asked if I got the promotion. To which he answered that I was not qualified, nor smart enough to do this job. After some thinking, I just decided that if I'm not smart enough to do the job, then I shouldn't do it. So I went back to doing my regular job and also started looking for something else. 4 to 5 days after I stopped filling in, my director comes to see me in the back of the store, asking why the fudge the job isn't being done. After all, without me to organize it, nothing was getting out of the store to be delivered to the client. I just reminded him of our previous meeting, and he told me, "Yeah, I remember that. What I meant was you're not qualified to get the pay bonus for the job. You still have to do the job, you idiot." I have to admit, I still wonder how he thought that would work. Still a bit dumbfounded, I just told him that if I wasn't going to get paid for it, I certainly wouldn't do the job. And that considering we were already short-staffed with my old supervisor gone, he should be a bit more polite. Apparently, this was an unreasonable request, a total lack of respect to him, and worthy of firing me. Yep, still don't know how that would fix anything, but hey, he's the boss. I packed everything up and left knowing that the back of the store, which needed 5 people to operate, was now down to 3, with the most experienced worker having a total of 4 months. It only took my boss 1 day to call me back and tell me maybe he went overboard and that perhaps we could arrange something for that promotion. To which I replied that I would not be coming back since I had a few interviews lined up. I hung up while he was still cursing at me. After a few months of my new job, I heard some surprising news. The store had closed down after 2 other backstore employees resigned. Gotta admit, that felt good to see my old boss finally getting what he deserved. Bury an old water tower to use as an emergency shelter? Sure, what could go wrong with that? Bye, nothing to see here. So, this actually happened to my dad a few years ago. He lived in an area right along the Texas-Oklahoma border in a fairly rural area. My dad primarily worked in pipeline construction. One day, my dad noticed that someone had purchased a very large property not too far down the road. Turns out, the new neighbor was actually from the suburbs around Columbus, Ohio, and had just won a lottery prize. The man hadn't won the jackpot, but had won a smaller prize around $2 million. My dad was also originally from Ohio, so he decided to say hello. A few days later, he meets the lotto neighbor. We'll call him Jim. Jim starts to tell my dad about his dreams to build his own self-sustained homestead far away from the rest of society. Jim was interested in preparing and convinced of a soon-to-come global societal collapse. He used his lotto winnings to purchase the land and began building his homestead. My dad honestly didn't find that odd because many people in the area had a tendency towards independence, and those preparing shows were popular at the time. About a year later, Jim reaches out to my dad to ask him to help him with a construction project that involved burying a large water tower in the ground. My dad is a little confused, but decides to take a look. Turns out, Jim bought an old water tower, about 15 feet in diameter and about 15 high, for the purposes of reusing it as an underground shelter. Jim had recently completed the building of his prefab home on his property and wanted the water tower buried partially under the new home with a trapdoor built into the closet to access it. My dad immediately thought this was the dumbest thing he had ever heard and proceeded to tell Jim all the potential issues with his plan. Jim cut him off and told my dad that his contractor for the home had basically told him the same, and so had several others he had contacted to try to get them to bury this water tower. However, Jim believed this was simple laziness on their part and had the utmost confidence in this plan. My dad left, but a day or so later, Jim contacted him again and asked about paying my dad to let him rent some construction equipment he had on his own property. My dad again goes over with him what a bad idea this is and how no legitimate crew would ever do this for him. Jim brings up using some dad's equipment and illegal laborers. My dad decides, well, if he's determined, might as well make a few bucks off the lotto winner Jim. He quotes him some ridiculous price to rent his equipment and says he can ask a guy at work he knows about gathering up a group of Mexican day laborers. Jim agrees to the crazy price, and my dad gets in touch with a Mexican friend who has a crew of day laborers. A bit later, my dad asks his friend about how the project is going. He tells my dad how nasty Jim's treating the workers, how stupid the plan is, and how his specifications for how he wanted this built were completely idiotic. However, they offered up suggestions or point out why something he wanted was wrong. He essentially shut them down and used a bunch of slurs for Mexicans. So, they buried the water tower, built the secret entrance exactly as he wanted, knowing it was completely stupid. He mentioned they only completed the job because Jim was paying them way more than what they were used to making. Everyone agreed Jim was a jerk, but all the more reason to gouge your prices and take his money. A year or so goes by when my dad gets a frantic call from Jim. It had rained quite a bit, which is unusual for this area, and now the entire ground floor area of the back of his house has bowed upwards about 2 feet. My dad goes to Jim's and takes a look around, realizing what had happened. Given that they had essentially just buried a large hollow object underneath his home, the rain caused the water tower to push upwards and right through the first floor. My dad explained the situation and Jim immediately loses it, started ranting about how he should have never had used those Mexican laborers and how he was going to make them come to fix it. My dad mentions how this was probably impossible since most of them go back and forth across the border, but Jim was livid. My dad later found out from Jim that his insurance would not cover the damage to his home because they had buried a water tower under it without telling anyone. He mentioned trying to sue the insurance company, but that went nowhere. He also tried numerous times to find the day laborers, but was told you get what you get when you hire illegal workers to do a project, and that would never have gotten a permit. Over the months afterwards, there was a lot of fallout for Jim, and he couldn't even live in his house due to the damage. It was eventually torn down to be able to remove the water tower from beneath it. He burned through his lotto winnings pretty fast, so he didn't have anything left to rebuild it. He ended up selling the land and moving away about a year later. My thoughts on these stories. So about the one for the guy who wanted a promotion, what the heck did the director think was going to happen? You can do the job, but you can't get paid for it? Who takes that deal? And then why would OP even go back after being fired? The business went under because his boss had no clue how to run it, that's for sure. I am so happy that OP got all this terrible job and complied to their lack of intelligence to this job. What a terrible boss. Congrats on the new job, OP. Now the one about the ex. I'm very happy OP is done with this man. He seems to be a liar and even worse. He wanted all his stuff, he got all his stuff. She was even nice enough not to mix the empties with everything else. It was also a great way of saying, I found what you were hiding. So now about the one who got written up for being late. Now, I personally always tell my boss when I think I'm going to be late through text message, just to be on the safe point, but I always have the same boss. But at the same time, if it's under 5 minutes, I don't need to, and I won't get written up for it either, if it's not a normal thing. And roads get bad, you get tied up, somewhere, stuff happens. To be written up every time is really harsh, and I totally would call off as well if I had no backlash because of it. They haven't figured out why they have more callouts now. They're not thinking hard enough. Last, about the water tower. When you have that many people telling you this is a bad idea, maybe it's a bad idea. They want to make money by working for you. Working is how they're going to get the money and get paid. He just, for some reason, had it in his head that he was right and everyone else was wrong. Well, in the end, it bit him in the butt, and I feel bad for his family, but not him. He had it really blow up in his face, and, everyone else was maliciously compliant to his desires. Remember to tell me what you think down below. I love to hear from you guys. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and make sure it feels it. Or you can even take it on a date before you hit it, if you like. Now look at that pretty new outro card. It's different, and there's a new patron on it. As the Raven Dreams, or Raven as we like to call him, has become my newest patron. Thank you so much, Raven. If you want to become a patron, link is down below and the info is on the screen. Now remember, if you're new, subscribe. Each subscriber gets us closer to a surprise I'm working on. And check out my merch. 2 different links for 2 different price points. But as always, thank you for watching. Come back this spooky, scary Sunday for night videos. I have some true scary stories for you. I hope you have a good day.